from The Hill. Schumer condemns DOJ meeting with Maxwell. Stinks of high corruption. Now, hold on there, gosh darn minute. Democrats were demanding we expose the Epstein files. So the DOJ says, we are going to dig into this. Trump says, get the grand jury testimony, whatever's credible, put it out there. They said, we're going to go talk with Ghislaine, and now the Democrats are freaking out. Could it be that they played a game of chicken with Donald Trump because neither party wants this information released, and now they're realizing Trump's going to do it?
I think that as long as they keep this floating, and as long as there's not actual evidence to put it to bed, where it's like they're not going to get the grand jury testimony out of Florida. The judge already denied it. They're probably not going to get it out of New York either. That's the way grand juries work. They're supposed to work, and they're operating in secrecy. So you're not going to likely see that. So as long as you can keep that going, you're going to have people that are excited about it. They're going to speculate about it. It's a political win for them as long as it's out there. Because I was on with Alex Jones the other day, and he was like, can you give me any good news? Like, is anybody winning? I'm like, yeah, of course people are winning. But you know who's winning? The people that are not in the news. The people that are actually like uncovering actual corruption, which got done. People like Secretary Wright over at DOE. There are people that are doing good work. They just don't do it on Fox.
Yeah.
And that's the way most governments have run for all of my lifetime and all of everybody else's lifetime, because you usually don't go and try to adjudicate your successes on Fox News every single night. That's not usually the way that these things. How many times have you ever seen an interview with an attorney general in 1 month? What's the most you've ever seen?
I mean, I can't even think of him.
Before Bondi, never.
Exactly. You never saw Merrick Garland running out there and like running to see if he could sit down with MSNBC. Maybe he did a weekend show or something.
Unless they had some political smear to launch the last minute before an election.
Exactly. That's it. It just doesn't happen in this way. So we're seeing something totally different. And now people are like, they're like, okay, if the game has changed, then I want to see more. Like, now you need to give us total transparency. And at the end of the day, the real work of government continues on, whether we like it or not. And it's just not done on Fox.
My concern, it's a bit conspiracy oriented, is that because you mentioned earlier how these girls that Epstein was trafficking and Ghislaine were trafficking were, I don't know if trafficking is the right word, but they weren't prepubescent.
It is
trafficking technically.
No, literal trafficking is when someone is taken to a place to be forced to do work that they don't want to do.
There's something about crossing borders, I think, that delineates between smuggling and trafficking.
Smuggling is when so a person is an illegal immigrant and wants to come to the U.S. and gets smuggled in. That's smuggling. Trafficking would be they're brought here to do labor. So if you're taking young girls and tricking them to go to an island to do sex work, you're trafficking them.
So it seems like they weren't prepubescent, so it's not pedophilia. That indicates prepubescent. We talked about this last week, actually. It was Phil's laughing. And I think a lot of people involved...
Nobody really makes the distinction in their head.
People are going to feel... Like, the people involved are like, if this gets out, my name gets put on a list, and people think I'm a pedophile, you know how pedophiles get treated. So they're going to the ends of the earth to cover it up. When, in reality, 14-year-old women, age of consent in a lot of countries, giving a guy a massage, and then he thinks she's 18, he has sex with her... Not pedophilia. You have your own emotions about it, but like if we can somehow maybe lower the heat on it,
that's a hell of an argument. It's still it's pederasty, but it's still illegal.
And there's a reason why culturally
it's pederasty.
I just want to say
statutory rape.
I just want to say something very, very carefully and clearly for you,
illegal.
Ian. The distinction you are trying to draw says a lot about what you want, because society largely disagrees with everything you just said.
That's true.
Pedophilia is post-pubescent. Is that true?
Typically, when you see people like Stephen King or whoever else, because he wrote those creepy books talking about that stuff, when people are publicly trying to draw a distinction between what it means to be sleeping with underage women, 99.9% of people in this country are like, why are you bringing that up? Because none of us agree with you.
You're flying too close to the sun, Ian. And I'm like, yeah, well, someone's got to get up here.
Ian,
this is where the keys are.
No, Ian, you're telling on yourself.
It's not a 17-year-old underage girl is not pedophilia. Not like a 6-year-old girl. It's not
in this country disagree with you.
And it's also a strict liability crime in almost every single state. So that means it doesn't matter whether you know or not the age. If they are under the age of consent, it is considered statutory rape. So just so you understand, like, the legality of it, you get, like, you're sideways of it on cultural norms. I do understand the distinction you're making. There are legal ages of consent in other places, 16 years old sometimes.
Even in the United States.
But in the United States...
In West Virginia, literally.
We generally look at the age of majority being 18, and then anything under whatever the age of consent is, it's almost always a strict liability crime, which means whether you knew it or not, whether she was someone who, went through puberty at 11 or 12 and blossomed and looks like a young woman. And yeah, everyone's been to, like, a public pool. I'm actually a father. I'm constantly, like, disgusted by what dads will have their daughters out there in the world looking like. I'm like, good God almighty. Like, so your 16-year-old looks like 25. That doesn't still put you within, just because someone looks older, It
So
doesn't
actually,
correct it on the legal side.
This is important. In 30 states and D.C., it's 16. So most of the United States.
And the reason they do that
Which
is
is why
so
they
that
mentioned
way
14, by the way, in the
Only 13 states have an age of 18 consent.
But the reason they do that is so that way 18-year-old teenage boys, essentially 17, 18-year-old boys, that if they have sex with their 16-year-old girlfriend, it doesn't
Incorrect.
ruin their life.
That's called the Romeo and Juliet exemptions, and they exist in most
That's
states.
not why that's not. Oh, it's
a
an exemption.
19, and so I'm pretty sure this is like Illinois is a good example. I can't speak for other places. If a 19-year-old is in a relationship with a 16-year-old in Illinois, that's a Romeo and Juliet exemption because they're both going to the same school, they're around the same age, or it's like they met in high school and the kid graduated, so they cut slack. I think if it's within 3 years, you get a Romeo and Juliet exemption.
So then why? So what's the point of 16 then?
Some states set it at 16.
That's
They
broken.
raised it. Legitimately.
That's
like
broken.
Mississippi was 14 for a long time.
Yeah.
Like I grew up in Mississippi, right? So then they raised it to 16.
When?
It didn't feel like it was that long ago. I don't know the exact date, but I do know that they raised it.
I mean, it's a weird conversation, but I like it. It's like age and time is motion, and people change and grow at different rates. You know, that's a biological reality, especially with like hormones.
Right,
They
which
make
is why that's why they put a baseline at the lowest level and say this is like as low as it should be appropriate. It changes culturally. I get what you're saying, but at the end of the day, at the United States, the other thing that's really weird too is that child pornography laws come into play sometimes because everybody is involved with smartphones and transmission of images. You fall underneath the federal statute under a certain age, and you transmit it to someone who's above. Now you're in really bad shape, and you may be within the age of consent in your own state.
Oh, that's messed up.
There was a story recently.
This used to happen with Polaroids back in the day. There was a case when I was in high school. I knew a guy who had gotten a Polaroid of a girlfriend or something. It was a huge scandal in this little town, and he was 17. I think she was 17, and they went after him for child pornography.
There was a story out of Illinois where there's like a 14-year-old girl and a 12-year-old boy, and they were Snapchatting each other. And when the parents got angry, and because the parents of the 12-year-old boy that called the police said, "We're going to arrest your son for child pornography too, if you really want to go down this route, because the law doesn't draw a distinction." And the parents were like, "What? No!" And they
It doesn't.
big scandal.
Yeah, no, it's and your transmission. So anytime you hit anything that's interstate, then you start becoming.
Which is like every
There was
server on the
a
internet.
story
It's
recently.
every server, and that's when it becomes a federal issue. So
There was a
that's outside the state.
story recently where I think the guy was 20 and he met a woman at a bar who was 17, but she had a fake ID, and they went and had sex. And then later, I forget how it came to light. He gets arrested. The mother of the woman he slept with, who was at the time now a woman, she was 17 at the time. Then it was like a year later she's in court, and her mom testified in his behalf that she deceived him and lied to him, and the court did not care. And
It's
he
strict liability.
Yeah, they don't care.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, I was just double checking my math because I had it in my head. But minor under the federal statute, particularly when it comes to images or anything like that, and transmission on interstate. So all your servers, anything. If you were to mail it, I guess that would also be an issue. Minor means anyone under the age of 18.
But let's clarify something too, Ian. Again, your distinction is completely immaterial to the fact that there were, let's say, a 16-year-old, right, was told by Maxwell. At least this is some of the reported what they were doing, saying, "We're wealthy financiers and we can have you model." And they would go, "Wow, come on our private jet. Wow, where to? Party on a private island with billionaires. This is amazing." They bring them there and say, "Now you can't leave unless you have sex with these men."
Yeah, that's a little messed up. It's similar to what I don't want to drag Andrew Tate. Oh, it's messed
Little?
up. But like Andrew, I was saying it was similar to what Andrew Tate was doing with those girls to come be his chat cam girls, and then he'd get them there and apparently would keep them against their will, or that was maybe the insinuation. It's one thing if you make them have sex with someone. That's like.
Well, I will say this. The challenging thing about the Tate case is that those, I think the charges all failed every time they've brought him up, and several women have testified in his defense. So say whatever you want about him. I don't know as much. Ghislaine Maxwell was convicted. Andrew Tate was actually, the charges fell apart.
Yeah, the Ghislaine thing, and I'll bring up Lex Wessner. I don't know how involved he was. He runs Victoria's Secret or ran it at the time. And there was a throughput, I believe, from the Maxwell and Victoria's Secret. They were like buddies. I don't know the extent of their relationship.
Yeah, so the way that and this is one of the reasons why people ask, because it's like quote unquote unexplained wealth is the big story in Jeffrey Epstein's case. So just the quick primer on it is he was a teacher at the Dalton School, which is a very fancy private school in New York. He had no college degree, and he theoretically wouldn't even have been in line to be teaching there. But he was hired, and this is where you start getting into famous name theater, but he was hired by Donald Barr, who is the former attorney general's dad, Bill Barr. Okay, so Donald Barr was the headmaster, apparently hired Jeffrey Epstein with no college degree to teach math and physics. And then Donald Barr left. Jeffrey Epstein started his first terms, was there for a little while. And then after he was there for a little bit, he inexplicably makes the leap from non-credentialed high school teacher at very expensive private school to investment banker at Bear Stearns. And the claim is that the CEO of Bear Stearns' child was either tutored by or one of his friends, his kid's friends was tutored by Epstein, saw talent and brought him into Bear Stearns. He did that for a couple of years. Then he jumps into this asset recovery company that he created. And then somewhere in that couple years, in the early 1980s, he suddenly is the guy who is in charge of all of Les Wexner's financial investments, to the point where in 1991, Les Wexner, who, as you said, owned The Limited and then Victoria's Secret was one of the companies as well, and the guy was a multi-billionaire, he signed over his power of attorney for all financials to Jeffrey Epstein. And I think the year was like 1991. Somebody will fact check me on that, but it's right around there, which makes no sense whatsoever. And Les Wexner also gave him the famous penthouse, or the apartment that he had in New York City, which people don't know why he did that. It was like a $50-something million property in the 1990s, and he just signed it over to him free and clear. So all of that made people ask questions. That's where a lot of the intelligence questions came in addition to the fact that Maxwell's dad had a bunch of people from the Israeli intelligence service attend his funeral. So you've got all these strange things. It's tons of smoke. There's very little in the way of concrete facts, and nobody knows how the guy became worth like close to $1 billion, if he was, because it's not the way people do business. You don't go from being a high school teacher to being a trader to being a guy who is then privately managing a billionaire's wealth. And then he also received flat fees in the millions of dollars a year, as opposed to based on performance, which is the way most people get. All of that's really strange.
Who got his money after he died?
Who's that?
Epstein.
So the estate is still out there, and it's been contested by a number of the victims that have claimed, and there's like something like 150 or 200 victims that have gone out there and filed claims. So all the young women that were apparently involved in this, and they're briefly mentioned in Maxwell's, going back to the original topic, they're briefly mentioned. I just want to read you, if you don't mind, like from the sentencing document, so you get an idea of what they were saying they did. They said that Maxwell attempted to befriend certain victims, asking them about their lives, their schools, their families, taking them to the movies, on shopping trips, and then acclimated them to Epstein's conduct by being present as the victims interacted with Epstein, which put the victims at ease, providing a certain amount of assurance and comfort that there was an adult woman there. So all this was very grooming-like behavior. And then they go on to talk about the things you said: paying for travel, educational opportunities, encourage them to accept Epstein's assistance and whatever it was, making the victims feel like they were indebted. So all of this is very like aggressive, grooming type behaviors. And it goes back to like 1994, when he's already got a ton of money and he's tied in with the people you were just talking about. So the story of Epstein is I think fascinating to people, mostly because it's a lot of money. There's not a lot of explanation why he has it, how he got into those positions, his interest in young women, whether you agree or not, like it's younger than is acceptable by most of American society. And then you get to the final place where he goes into a jail cell and 30 days in, kills himself, and there's all this lore around it, which is far more than what you ever see in the court documents.
What is this? You said Lex Wessner signed over power of attorney of his fine. What does that mean exactly?
He gave him power of attorney, which means that he had the same authority to make decisions as Les himself would.
With his finances.
With his finances.
So he could invest all Lex's money in his
Yes.
own company, and that would be completely legal?
Yeah, and what's interesting is he was actually, apparently he left his job at Bear Stearns for an insider trading problem. He like lent somebody some money while he was doing some insider trading stuff to the tune of like 300 grand. So he got censored and he had to leave.
We got a quick addition, not necessarily a correction, but in federal matters pertaining to interstate travel, the age of consent is always 18.
And then
I think it's a Mann Act thing. It goes back to the which was like a white slave trafficking law.
And then what the weird thing now we're facing is digital information transfer, because if an image is seen in a state and then it goes to a server in Alaska and then comes back to the state, no one ever sees it in Alaska. It's just on a server, and the person only sees it here and here on two phones in the same state. Technically, the image never. The electricity left.
They
the
literally
state.
They do that as part of the argument when they do these filings, and they actually argue it in court that the servers exist in these places. Let's say if you want to do a federal case on guns, for example, they will make the argument that it is a federal matter simply because the gun was not made in the state that you're in, and therefore it had to be trafficked in there. So if you live in a state outside of Georgia and you have a Glock, then you have now found yourself in an interstate commerce situation. These lines are very, very.
The Commerce Clause needs to be repealed. They need to fix that goddamn thing.
It definitely shouldn't be used as justification for federal law enforcement to be able to grab everything that goes outside of the state. And so in the case of what you're talking about, anything that touches the telco wires touches a server, touches a cloud, even if you like theoretically are just you to me, it's assumed to be an interstate matter at that point. It's the means of communication. It doesn't actually have to show that it went anywhere. And so just using that technology is enough to make it a federal matter. Whether you like it or not, that's just how it plays out.
Thanks for checking out this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to watch the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Subscribe to this channel, and we will see you all there.